I am Eadweard Muybridge, also previously known by my nom de plume Helios. I emigrated from England to the United States in 1851 and later settled as a bookseller in San Francisco. After a series of dramatic events that I shall later explain, I returned to this city to devote my full attention to the art of photography. During this lecture, I shall outline some of my key photographic investigations since the late 60s up until this present day in 1878. I might have died a simple bookseller in San Francisco, an old man and a simple life, but fate had another plan for me. It was the year 1860, when I was returning to visit England. I missed the ship from the port of San Francisco and instead traveled overland en route to New York City. It was while we were traversing the dusty trails of Texas that the horses pulling our stage grew wild and ran away, toppling our coach and throwing several passengers to their deaths. I do not remember my fall, but when I awoke 10 days later, alas, I could scarcely remember my name. My gentle audience, although we were limited in the practice of cognitive science, any man worth his salt, physician or layman, could clearly see that I was a changed man. This white hair that you see was a rich black, and it turned white immediately after the accident. But this tragedy was not for naught. Since that time, I've been focused and productive in many an endeavor. Life had a lot more waiting for me, and I would grab it at its coattails and live life to the fullest. I returned to San Francisco in the year 1867 a transformed and invigorated man. I was working as a photographic view artist and had taken the name of Helios, Greek god of the sun. I had at this time a reputation of undisputed and unparalleled skill because of my well-known photographs of the Yosemite Valley. The first time I had ever laid eyes on the majestic Yosemite was the year 1860, when I was a man of only 30 years old. To say that my breath was stolen from me is an understatement. All those years as I laid in England convalescing from my accident, I yearned for the time that I would return to California to photograph this majestic place. This wonderful valley with its lofty peaks, its stupendous precipices, its majestic waterfalls and innumerable points of beauty. In order to get these views of Yosemite Cliff that you see before you, I spent a week clambering to points never before been reached by artists or tourists, and made the picture satisfactorily, though risking my life many times during days of setup of photography. It is only due to my sheer stubborn determination and ferocious tenacity that I am able to share this with the world today. In the spring of the year 1872, while I was directing the photographic surveys of the United States government along the Pacific coast, there was revived in the city of San Francisco a controversy in regard to animal locomotion. I was invited by Governor Leland Stanford to help settle a wager. In the year 1872, ladies and gentlemen, one could not conceive that the fleeting moment could be captured and frozen in time. But I was to put an end to all that. There was a wager made regarding a horse while trotting, even at the height of his speed, having all four of his feet simultaneously free from contact with the ground. The problem before me was to obtain a sufficiently well-developed and contrasting image on a wet collodion plate after an exposure of so brief a duration that a horse's foot moving with a velocity of more than 30 yards in a second of time, should be photographed with its outlines practically sharp. The racetrack became my canvas, and I set off for Sacramento in May 1872, where a prize horse of Governor Stanford called the Occident should be the horse that made history. Please remember, fair audience, that in those days a photographer was in great measure his own chemist, so after preparing dipping baths, making my own chemicals, coating all of the plates, and more, I was overjoyed to see the horse proving our thesis correct as he raced in all of his splendor, all four magnificent hooves flying through the air. I settled the question once and for all time. I have the great pleasure of informing you that I have just published the first photographic panorama of San Francisco. As you can see, the point of views being from the tower of the new residence of railroad developer Mr. Mark Hopkins on California Hill, approximately 400 feet above the waters of the bay. Dear friends, you may think that other states and cities may be in greater and in many respects more attractive, but we can all agree that none equals San Francisco in their panoramic scenic effect. The panoramic character of its topography is not the least deserving of our attention, though it has been overlooked, at least by people generally, until I discovered and utilized its artistic value. San Francisco might be considered as the perfect environment for this new form of time-based photographic recording. This photograph of San Francisco, recently made by putting together a succession of views which, taken from a commanding central viewpoint, makes a complete circuit of the horizon, presenting the amphitheatric nature of our city. The zoopraxiscope. It is the first apparatus ever constructed or used for synthetically demonstrating movements analytically photographed from life, and as a result it is the prototype for all of the various instruments which are used for a similar purpose at the present day. The combination of such an instrument with the phonograph has not at the time of this lecture been satisfactorily accomplished. There can, however, be but little doubt that in the not far distant future, instruments will be constructed that will not only reproduce visible actions simultaneously with words, but an entire opera with the gestures, facial expressions, and the songs of the performers, combining the principles of the zoopraxiscope and the phonograph for the entertainment of an audience long after all of the original participants shall have passed away.
London, 18th December 1888, and through the medium of the phonograph, Mr. Edison reached you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at a compassionate soul, but I could not have known when I awoke on the morning of the 17th of October 1873 that I would go to bed that night a murderer. You see, I am a loyal man, and my heart broke when at 10 o'clock that morning I had intercepted a letter from my wife's maid confirming that my beloved Flora had had an illegitimate child with one Major Harry Larkins. I packed a full day's provisions and I immediately traversed across the bay, first by foot, then by boat, then by a horse and carriage, the 5-hour journey to Calistoga, knowing that I might not live to return. I arrived at the Yellow Jacket mine near Calistoga at 11 o'clock at night, bone-weary from my long journey, but intent to complete my mission. I knew that my next action might be my last. When the foul adulterer appeared, roused from his card game, he may have thought a friend was calling. I can imagine to this day his surprise and terror when I said, "I have brought you a message from my wife." A fair marksman, I was able to shoot him dead, one steel bullet to the heart. My dear gentlemen of the jury, strung up to the pitch of insanity, I made up my mind that I must slay the destroyer of my happiness, the man who had debauched my name. I would follow him to the ends of the earth for that purpose. On the grounds of justifiable homicide and insanity, they proved that years ago I had indeed been thrown from a stagecoach, receiving a concussion leading to a coma of 9 days and hair that turned from black to white in 3 days. And I have never been the same man since. The depth of my impassioned love of my wife, I was wrapped up in her. I lived only for her. Having you shown all this, we shall ask you, as the law does, to look at my acts with mercy. My lawyer stated in his closing argument, "I cannot ask you to send this man forth to family and home, for he has none." Across the arch of his fireplace were once written the words, "Home, wife, child, content, and peace." There now appears a substitute for all, in black letters, placed there by the destroyer of his happiness, the single awful word, desolation. I ask you, members of the jury, send him forth free. Let him take up the thread of his broken life and resume the profession upon which his genius has shed so much luster, the profession which is now his only love, photography.